All right, everybody, good afternoon. Got Coach White here. We'll just jump straight into questions. Josh?
Hey, Brad.
Hey, Josh.
I'll start out with one I'm sure you're eager to talk about, maybe. But I asked uh, Mark about this on Monday. The pass rush just never seemed like it really got going for you. At least when you look at the numbers and things. Was that? And what do you attribute that to? And maybe here in the short term, how do you get that sorted out going into this game? And maybe kind of looking ahead a little bit long term, where do you see that going?
Yeah, obviously that was probably one of our weak spots this year. Obviously, one of the things that we did not do nearly well enough. Um, in terms of the short term, the big thing that we have to do is we have to continue to focus on the details because, and I think Coach had mentioned it, is that, everybody, sometimes it's do we need to be, cleaner in our stunts? Was the pattern right? Could I be more aggressive? Could the coverage stick a little bit longer? There's a lot of things that go into it. And I know I've talked this year about, there's been several times, I feel bad a little bit for Phil, is that Phil could have had, 3 or 4 this year where he's hitting the quarterback as the ball's come. But if we had just been a little bit cleaner in our coverage and that QB had to hold that ball, he's got one. So, but on the whole, that it's not anywhere close to what we expect, what my demand is here. And that's going to be an area of focus. Can we get it fixed in one game? I don't know if that's the case. But, long term, we've got to find, a guy that can be an elite rusher. And what we also have to find is some continuity, among those rushers, where I thought we were really good last year, with Calvin, was all 4 rushers were really good and tied in together. And so Calvin's internal pressure, made our outside rushers better. Our outside rushers helped, get Calvin the numbers that he got. So we've got to work together better in that regard, and we'll continue to evaluate that going forward.
Nick?
Drew and Carrington, they've been shouted out by Mark and Vince throughout the week for their play. Just what have they been doing well in practice? And then if they do get a chance against these big wide receivers, is there anything you can do in particular to kind of limit their size? I mean, they say you can't coach size. So how do you coach against it?
Well, that's right. First of all, you can't. I mean, if you're 6'3" or 6'4", that's a sort of a God-given talent. And, but what you can do is, you can play with great eye discipline. You can, affect the route early. You can play through the hands. If you're behind it, if you're in good body position. What this is going to come down to is we're going to have guys compete. When that ball's up there, and they do a great job of going up and high pointing that ball, and Hawkman does a great job of throwing a nice catchable deep ball, but we're going to have to go compete for those balls. And, hopefully we can come down with 1 or 2, knock out a couple, but it's not a team that you just take that away. They've had that success in all 11 games that they've played, throwing those balls up. So we've got to do a good job, try to, mix up the coverage. Different people are going to get opportunities, and they're going to have to go make plays. The thing they can't be, especially being young, is they can't be intimidated. They've got to try to be physical, at the line of scrimmage, and throughout the route. They do a nice job of, their receivers do a nice job of really at the point of contact. They'll create a little bit of separation, that won't get called. And we've got to be able to fight that pressure. So it'll be a good challenge. And those are some of the things it's hard to rep in practice, because if you try to replicate it, with another player or within scout team, you risk injury having two players go up. So it's going to be one of those things that they're going to have to figure out on game day.
Larry?
Brad, when you talk about the group of freshman defensive linemen that you had, can you talk a little about the progress you felt they made this year, what you still need going forward? And is there somebody in that group that could be that elite pass rusher going forward you're looking for?
Well, we'll see. I don't know if in this true freshman group right now, if anybody jumps out, in terms of being an elite rusher. We've the class that we signed specifically was heavy sort of inside, and they've been developing, early and played the majority of their snaps, on first and second down. But I think Trayvon Ripka's got a chance to be a solid interior pass rusher for us. I think Sam, in the long run, as he continues to sort of grow into his body and understand, all the pass, I think he's got a chance to be a really good rusher. Now, he's got some improvement to do, because when we talk about elite rusher, those guys tend to have sort of high level twitch, and we need to find that. We need to find, and continue to look for that. But I've been pleased with the freshmen as a whole, not just the front, but from a linebacker standpoint with De'Eric, and then you think and you move on, to the young guys in the secondary, and we've talked about Carrington and Drew, and really excited, about how Vito's progressing, and Joel Williams has really, I thought, over these last couple of weeks has made a big stride for us. Now, when you make a big stride as a freshman, it still makes you a sophomore. And so we've still got a ways to go to be, to have guys that are, competing at the highest level, that we need to succeed, both in a bowl game like this, or, in the future within the SEC. So we've got some work to do, but having these extra bowl practices have been great for those young kids, and we're excited about the future.
John Clay?
Brad, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge the North Carolina State offense presents to you guys?
Well, I think it's sort of a twofold deal. I think they're really a quality outside zone running team. They'll sprinkle in a little bit of a gap scheme, but they do a really nice job of creating those, internal vertical seams, and the running backs do a great job. They've got sort of a two-headed monster there. And then, like we talked about earlier, they do a really nice job of throwing those balls out to the sideline and letting those big wideouts go up and compete and make big plays. So it's sort of twofold, and they set each other up. If you feel like you've got to, load up the box or protect the box, then they know they've got those one-on-one opportunities on the outside. If you try to protect the outside edges, then you lighten up the box, and they've got a chance to hit a big one in the run game. So they're really, really balanced in that regard. Then you throw in a little bit of tempo, and we've got to do a good job of, we got to mix up, fronts and coverages, and we've got to do a great job of getting aligned. We talk about it all the time, every week. It's, hey, get your cleats in the ground, get your eyes where they need to be, and then execute the call. So down in and down out, we have to be efficient in that regard. And then when we get a chance to get to third down, we've got to get off. And at times this year, we've been solid, and but then there's plenty of times, and Missouri jumps to mind where we did not. We were even at times when we bled a little bit on first and second down, we'd bow our necks and we get ourselves to third, have a chance to get off, and then we didn't get off, and we had some really long extended drives in that Missouri game. So we've got to do a good job. We've got to try to continue to create turnovers. I think over the last 8 games, with 19 of them, I thought the guys did a great job of attacking the ball, both in the air and from a fumble standpoint. We need to continue to do that. I think that's going to be a huge key in this game.
Dick.
Hey, Brad, you referred to the Missouri game, and that was one of 2 or 3 where you had really a lot of trouble getting off the field on third down. When you went back and evaluated, was there any one thing in particular you could put your finger on as to why that was so challenging in those games?
Oh yeah, it came down to executing the call, and I could rattle them all. I mean, and granted, I think there was 20 of them in that game, and just off the top of my head, I could rattle. Hey, we didn't run this stunt correctly. If we had played, there was a time when we were in man coverage and we didn't jump our man in a stack. We played off. We allowed ourselves to get picked. Different things that sometimes that they don't show up in practice. Like we execute it fine in practice, and for some reason, sort of on that day, it was always sort of just one thing after another. One person he lost contained in the pass rush on that crucial third down in the fourth quarter. So we've got to execute the details, and that the old cliche, the devil's in the details. When it's third down and it's crunch time, we have got to execute what is the path, what is the coverage. And when those things get married, then you're successful. And it goes all the way back to the very first question about how do you generate more sacks? Well, if we execute both the front, getting aligned correctly, running the proper stunt, running the proper coverage, executing the technique within that play call, we give ourselves a chance to get more of that and to generate more negative plays.
Kent.
Brad, this may have been aligned a little bit with what you just said. The other day, Mark said, defensively this season at times, he didn't think the defense was as focused mentally as they needed to be. As a coach, can you see that before the game, or is it almost during when you see some of the mistakes that have taken place?
You know what? I think you can get a pulse in pregame. It's funny. I was talking, that might have been Coach Summerall, and we've all been around where you feel like you had the worst week of practice and you come out and you play the best game of defense you've ever played. There's been weeks where you feel like you've had the best practice, 4 practices you've ever had, and you go out and you play terrible. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to judge, especially when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, but you can get a pretty good feel of where they are in pregame. And then obviously as the game's going, you can see it in their faces. You can see it in sort of their reactions on the sideline. It's one of the reasons that I like being a coordinator on the sideline, because I think you need to read their reaction as much as anything else. Sometimes the best play call isn't the best play call I drew up on the whiteboard because it matches the best route. The best play call is what they feel confident in. And, that's a challenge for me to continue to find, because every group's different. Last year's defense it was more comfortable in 4-man rush and coverage. Another defense in other years, maybe, hey, we're going to play more man. One's going to be more zone. So it's about finding what those guys do well. I think having some injuries, that's part of football, having to deal with, some guys being in and out, that's part of it. And, when you can find a continuity of group, in that same group, then it makes it a little bit easier to figure out, all right, this is what they will be confident in. But I do think that you can sense that. But again, it does require focus, and it requires it not for 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, it's 4 quarters. And the one thing I think we need to be better, specifically is in the second half. I think last year we were a better second half defense last year than we were this year. I think we've played solid in the first half. If you look at most games, we need to come out of halftime with that same focus and intensity.
All right, Quentin is here, so we've got a couple more. Chris Leach, Derek, and then Jeff Drummond, and then we'll get Quentin on. So Chris, go ahead.
Hey, Brad. Obviously, your all's upcoming offensive coordinators coming from the NFL. And since you were coaching in the NFL prior to coming to Kentucky, I was just wondering if you've given him any advice on making that transition from pros to college.
You know, Liam's a little bit like me. Liam coached in college before he went to the NFL. So him coming back to college, it's not like he's never coached at this level. So really not much needed in that regard. Just, letting him know that we're excited to have him, and making sure that he understands that his high school was second to mine. So.
Derek.
Brad, just looking at the depth chart, it would seem like Katie McDaniel next year will be a guy in line to receive a little bit more playing time. I haven't seen him a ton this year, but I was just wondering kind of where he is in terms of his progression and maybe how close you think he is to contributing.
Yeah, you know what? I think Katie's one that's everybody wants instant success. And Katie's been one that it's taken a little bit more time, but we're starting to – we're making the progress that we need. I thought he's had a really good week of practice this week. I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to see some more snaps of him this week in the game. And see, we talked about, finding that pass rusher and that guy with twitch. KD flashes that. That's what we saw in high school. And he's beginning to grow into both his body and his mind in our system, and I think that's early on. We have a fairly extensive playbook, and if you overthink, you play slow and you lose what that natural ability is. And so we've been trying to find things that can, we can simplify it, to let him play fast and let his natural ability show. And so, hopeful that we'll get to see some of that on Saturday.
All right, we'll wrap up with Jeff Drummond.
Hey, Brad, I seem to recall you guys were getting a little bit thin at a couple of those linebacker spots late in the season. Has the time off enabled you to get back to your kind of normal depth there? And as a second part to the question, does NC State remind you on film of anybody you've seen already this season?
From a health standpoint, I would say yes. Obviously, we're not going to have JJ back. Coming off that Florida injury, but everybody else, we should be fairly healthy. And obviously, when anytime you get essentially 4 weeks off, allows us to nurse a lot of wounds. So, we're excited about that, refreshed and ready to roll. As far as who they remind me of, I think it goes back to, they remind me, the closest comparison is Missouri, with that ability to run the outside zone with a little bit of gap scheme mixed in. And then, pushing the ball downfield is a little bit different how the two teams do it. But the concept and the mindset was the same, is the run was going to open up deep vertical shots. Missouri did it a little bit more through eye violations and, a little bit more gadget style. NC State a little bit more straight up, going to go run some verticals and give their guys a chance to go make a play down the field.
All right, I appreciate it. We'll have Q on in just a second for you.